Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Form Check Friday. Yes, it is that time again. If y'all are interested in how to submit your videos to become a part of this wonderful social experiment we call Form Check Friday, go ahead and click the annotation link on the screen right now. We have a whole video detailing how to submit your videos, preferred formats, etc. All that stuff is laid out very clearly. So, that being said, we're going to start off with last week's last submission, which we had our commenters critique. And because we're doing this in very rapid chronological succession, that hasn't been posted, so I don't have access to any of those comments. But I'm sure there's a lot of wonderfully brilliant things people have said, and everyone's been very respectful, which is generally the case in our community, and I'm very happy for it. So just to give a quick recap here, Sean has spent 4 years lifting as mostly a bodybuilder, but he says he really likes lifting heavy. This is 405 for 6. Says he weighs about 170 pounds, and he recently had a back injury. Now, I'm not sure how that kind of plays into all of this, but let's take a look at these deadlifts. Now, I definitely noticed we're doing some touch and go. I think good patience off the floor there. Maybe a little bit shy of lockout, honestly. I'd like to see the hips a little bit more extended and pushed through. And the biggest thing here is I have a bit of an insta gripe with touch and go deadlifts. I think using touch and go deadlifts, perhaps in a bodybuilding context makes more sense. So if you're not worried about, the increase of your estimated or actual 1 rep max in the deadlift, as much as you are interested in, creating mechanical and metabolic stress and tension, then maybe this doesn't matter as much. But for any powerlifters out there watching, we basically very, very rarely want to be skipping the bottom of the range of motion. See how when we kind of bounce it off the floor, we're just missing out on the practice of creating and maintaining position through the start of the range of motion. So that's probably my biggest gripe. Honestly, technically throughout the lift, you look pretty damn sound. Could maybe be a little bit more sort of hips through, a little bit more extension there in terms of your lockout position. But overall, I think they look pretty darn good. So keep doing what you're doing. And, just think about maybe doing some dead stop deadlifts in the future, even as an accessory movement if you're trying to push that ability to lift the heaviest weights you can. Up next, we got Rob here. Rob's 39 years old. He's doing some high bar squats. And he says this is 218 kilos for 8 reps, which is very respectable. And his goal here is 230 for 10. So let's take a look, man. These are some picture perfect high bar squats. I also love that this dude's in jorts. I can definitely appreciate that. And just yacked. I think even with these later reps, we're not really seeing too much breakdown, man. Like the one thing we're seeing a little bit of happen is this bar kind of pulling you forward. But I mean, that's a 9.5 RPE. And when you get to that point in these high bar sets, that's going to be the thing that gives out. It's kind of like front squatting in some ways. Maybe not to the same extent. We're probably going to be more able to train to a point where we can miss a high bar squat on lower body strength than we can on the front squat. But I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that's going to become an issue is that maintenance of position in the shoulders and upper back. So the better you can keep that tight as you drive out of the hole, we can see the elbows pitch up and the bar pitch forward there as we hit that sticking point on the last rep. That's probably where I would put my focus and attention, is in trying to keep that upper back as tight as we possibly can, trying not to let that bar roll you forward. And even if that means a little bit less dip on those later reps, a little bit more control into the hole so we can better anticipate that sort of impact on the upper back position, I think that's probably worth it. So that would be my only criticisms, because depth is fantastic. I mean, everything that's going on with the lower body is great. We're not seeing like a wild hip shoot up or knee shoot back. Looks really, really good, man. So best of luck with your goal of getting 230 for 10. Hit us up, send a video in if you get it, because that's awesome. Our next submission here comes from Benjamin. Now, Benjamin wants to do his first powerlifting meet in November, and he says he has a hard time keeping upper back tightness between reps. So he's 22, he's been lifting for 4 years now, and let's take a look at what's going on. see what we can see. So we got a little bit of that sort of like jolty leg drive. And what I would say is that's fine. Like we want to be using a lot of leg drive when we're pressing. But what I would do is maybe play with your foot position so that you can try to contribute a little more consistently throughout the set. I'm not saying that the jolt is a bad thing, but it doesn't look like we have a whole lot of leg drive beyond that initial jolt. And it looks like the jolt is very hips up instead of actually pushing back and contributing to that arch. So I think that a little bit better, more consistent leg drive is probably going to help you kind of drive up onto your traps and drive those shoulder blades down by pushing you this way. And that could have an impact on, you know, kind of that intra-set tightness. The big thing is just to make sure that you're locking out with your triceps and that you're not, see there, we have this like lapse of tightness as you lock out. So when you lock out, think about keeping the shoulders drawn back and punching through with your triceps as opposed to pushing through and letting your shoulders go. Because then when the shoulders go, I mean, that's how we lose tightness in the upper back, right? So we watch this second rep here. We set, and you can see kind of like you're like reaching your shoulders through. Don't do that. Keep super, super tight back there. I think that's really important to maintain that tightness in the upper back. And just, yeah, we just need to clean up that lockout, because I think that lockout is more shoulder protraction. So the shoulder blade moving along the rib cage towards the the front of the body. So we're doing that, we're losing that. And that's part of why we're a little bit uneven in lockout. And that's why we're losing tension between reps. But looks like you got a very respectable bench. And man, I love to see you compete in powerlifting. So hopefully you stick with it and do it. And hopefully your meet doesn't get canceled, because a lot of meets are getting canceled right now. So good luck. All right, this is Chris. Says he's been powerlifting for a little over 2 years. He's back in the gym for 2 months now, post-quarantine, post-lockdown rather, and says he's hitting PRs already on squat and bench, but he's trying to figure out how to pull the slack and find patience with the deadlift. He says he just can't seem to figure it out. He's also said he's got some pain in his hip flexor, so he's going to take some time off of deadlifting. So there's a couple different things in there I want to unpack. Number one, learning how to pull the slack out of the bar. So let's take a look at Chris's deadlift here, Chris's pulls. So right now, the way you're setting your hips down, Chris, is not creating tension. You're just kind of sitting down. So what I want you to do is I want you to start with your hips high. So you get a lot of tension in your hamstrings, right? Like you're doing a stiff leg deadlift with your butt way up in the air. And then I want you to start pulling yourself down. Slowly pull yourself down. I mean, your position here is fantastic. There's nothing wrong with your position. It's just the position is created by like sitting your butt down passively. I want you to actively like use that bar to leverage yourself against the bar. See how here we're just kind of like sat down? And then when we start, those hips come up. So I think we're sitting the hips too far down instead of like simultaneously reaching them back and down. And I think that's part of where the tension comes from. Now lockouts look good. We're nice and solid. I'm not sure the gloves, maybe that's like a COVID thing. I know you got a mask on there, so maybe that's something the gym requires, and if so, whatever. It doesn't look to me like he's using these to get a grip advantage here, right? Like those are like gardening gloves or something, so maybe that's just the gym policy. It looked like we might have missed that last one. Gotten a little bit caught out in front of ourselves. So again, if we're putting the hips too far down, a lot of times we end up with that posterior pelvic tilt, that sort of dumped pelvis. And you know, that can cause these lockout issues that we're seeing there, right? So here we're trying to push the hips in already, where I think we need to be focusing on the knee lock before the hips go in. Now, the next thing I want to unpack is just the fact that you said you got some hip flexor pain and you're going to take some time off of deadlifting. What I would counter that with is let's just lighten it up. Let's do some light deadlift work. We got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plates aside, and maybe some change there. So we're pulling around 500 pounds, maybe a little bit over here for double, maybe triple. Hard to say. Video's cut creatively, but so what I would recommend, man, just bring it down to like 275, 315 and hammer some work in there. Chances are you're going to be able to move more or less pain-free. Maybe you need to adjust the stance or the toe angle or some of those things. Anecdotally, I've seen can have some interaction with hip flexors. By doing so, by dialing things back and staying with the movement, not only can you use this pain experience as kind of a teaching tool to figure out, okay, well, I need to deload right now. Like, I need to pull back, because if I keep pushing, probably going to make things worse. So I got to pull back in some way, shape, or form. So this could be a good excuse to dial things back, lighten the loads, really refine and practice the skill of your deadlift. And a lot of times, there's a certain contingent of people that think injuries are gifts. And I would maybe argue against that. But I do think that, we can play with the cards that were dealt, and we can say, okay, well, I can't push my deadlift hard right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be creative. I'm going to problem solve. I'm going to try to adjust my technique and figure out some of these things that I haven't been able to figure out. And chances are, as you come back from that injury, hopefully you can just surpass where you were before. So it's a bit of a different take on that. But all right. Next up, we have clavion or clavion. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, so hopefully I didn't just butcher it. All right, man. Recently switched to low bar. He says he's got bad back pain previously doing low bar. He mentioned that he worked up to like 137.5 for 5 before, had a fair bit of back pain, and now he says he's back to 100 kilos for 5, and he's getting really bad back pain again after every set. He says he's getting really frustrated, just isn't sure what to do. So, number one thing I'm seeing here is we're really biasing the posterior chain. Like, we're very knees back, very hips back, very tilted, questionable depth. So what I would do, man, is I would just incorporate not even a high bar squat, but don't think about them as such like totally different, estranged movements, and just squat. Right? The bar a little bit lower on your back is going to inherently cause you to move differently. You don't need to like conceptualize it as this totally different, like Rippetoe-esque kind of squat. I think there's a lot of common misconceptions out there. I think it's probably Rippetoe's fault that a lot of people think this is the only way you can low bar squat. Like, if you let your knees forward at all, you're betraying the low bar squat. Like, there's just a lot of silly notions that aren't your fault. It's not your fault for like buying into that or thinking that might be right. But I mean, I think that dogmatic people are predisposed to being very wrong in a lot of cases. Sure, probably right in some cases, but very wrong in others. So I think it's important to be pragmatic and question these things when people are like, everybody needs to squat like this. It's like, no. Doesn't work like that. So what I would recommend after my little rant there, don't be so hips back. Let those knees come forward. Squat a little deeper, because right now we're a little high. And another thing, pull those elbows down. Like, this to me just, I don't hate to, but I maybe feel a little bit bad just ripping on Rippetoe. We'll play on words there for you. But like, this to me just reeks of Rippetoe's influence. So you get the elbows super far back, hips super far back, knees super far back. It just doesn't need to be like that. Pull those elbows down, right? Pull those elbows a little bit more in line with your trunk. Think a lot about creating upper back tension. A lot of the times that takes care of like additional and undue stress on the low back. I've seen a lot of people fix their upper back position, and all of a sudden, like, things down the chain just like start making more sense. Right? So let's work on that upper back position. Make sure those shoulder blades are retracted, pulled back towards one another behind your back. Make sure those shoulder blades are depressed, that they're pulled down. Try to find some sensation and some tightness in your lats. Imagine kind of like doing a behind the neck pull down with the bar, where you're pulling it into your back and trying to create a real shelf for it to be stable on, as opposed to just like winging your shoulder blades back and literally just like placing it on your bone structure or whatever RIP advocates for. Sorry, this is sounding really anti-Rip-a-toe, and maybe I am, but I don't think I'm that anti-Rip-a-toe. Anyways, the other thing, let those knees travel forward, man. If you let those knees travel forward, you'll be a little bit more upright, which causes a little bit less stress on the back. Again, I use this sort of idea or concept in a previous Form Check Friday, but the idea of being more of a column as opposed to a lever. Does that make sense, right? Let those knees forward. You know, you can squat like a little bit more high bar while still using low bar and taking advantage of the shortening of the lever of the torso, which is inherent with the low bar squat. You can still take advantage of low bar without having to change everything about your squat and squat in a way that's uncomfortable and causes you pain. So, like, I can also see you're like driving your hips up first, which again is like a very Rip-a-toe thing. And this is a classic case of those things don't work for everybody. They just don't. And again, my passion here is not directed at you for buying into this. It's just directed at people who think that there's only one way to do things and everyone should do it the same. Anyways, I really do hope clavion, that helps, and that you can kind of like think about the squat a little bit differently and improve and not be in pain anymore. Because I want you to stick with lifting. I want you to keep doing this. I want you to solve that problem, and I want you to come out of this successful. And I want you to feel like you did that, like you're responsible for fixing your issues, right? Take it into your own hands, problem solve, troubleshoot, think critically. You can figure it out. Don't give up, man. All right, Ben. Excuse me. Ben's doing some bench press. He says he's looking to get into powerlifting. He says he's 20 years old. The weight on the bar is 105 kilos. He says he's unsure about his grip width and why one arm seems to shoot up quicker or more than the other. So what I want everybody to do is just watch this set of bench one more time. And I want you to go ahead and head on down to the comments section where we leave constructive criticism for one another. And let's all get a little bit better at maybe analyzing some of this stuff when we see lifting, so that we can have discussions and think critically about how to be better lifters, how to be more efficient. So I hope everybody had, got something out of today. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. Comment below any advice for Ben. And we will start with Ben next episode. I'm not leaving him high and dry. Make sure to hit that subscribe. Click the thumbs up. We'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.